I never thought I'd be telling this story. 8 years of marriage, and I thought I knew everything about Rachel. We met in college, fell in love, and built what I believed was the perfect life together in suburban Boston. I'm James Mitchell, 35, working as a senior project manager at a tech firm. Rachel is a marketing executive at one of the biggest firms in the city. We had it all planned out. The dream house we were saving for, the kids we'd have, even the golden retriever we'd adopt. But life has a way of shattering your perfect plans. It started 3 months ago, in ways so subtle, I almost missed them. Rachel began staying late at work more often than usual. "Big project," she'd say, kissing me quickly before rushing out the door. "Michael needs these reports by morning," became her constant refrain. Michael Thompson, her boss, someone I'd met at company parties, tall, expensive suits, that kind of corporate swagger that always seemed a bit too practiced. I should have known, but you never want to be that guy, right? The suspicious, controlling husband who questions his wife's every move. So I ignored the signs. I ignored how she'd turn her phone face down whenever I walked into the room. I ignored the way she'd step outside to take calls. I ignored the new dresses, the extra time she spent getting ready for work. God, I was such an idiot. The truth came crashing down on a Saturday night in September. Rachel had told me she had a team-building event. "Spouses aren't invited," she said, wearing that little black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The one she claimed was too revealing for work events. I remember thinking she looked beautiful and feeling a pang of disappointment that I couldn't go with her. Then my buddy Steve called. "Having some people over for beers," he said. "Could use some company." Steve lived just around the corner from where Rachel's event was supposed to be. I thought, why not? I could have a few beers, maybe even surprise Rachel with a ride home later. Funny how life works, isn't it? I got to Steve's around 9, and we were hanging out in his backyard when I heard it. Rachel's laugh. That distinctive sound I'd know anywhere, coming from the house next door. My stomach dropped. "Hey, Steve," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who lives next door?" "Some exec from downtown," he replied. "Having a party tonight." I walked to the fence, my heart pounding. Through the gaps between the boards, I saw her. My wife, drink in hand, laughing at something Michael was saying. His hand was on her lower back, way too low to be professional. I stood there, frozen, watching as he leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She giggled, actually giggled, and then they started moving toward the house. As they passed through the patio doors, I saw his hand slide down to grab her ass. Something in me snapped. I don't remember climbing the fence. I remember pushing through the crowd of confused partygoers. But I'll never forget what I saw in that kitchen. Rachel was perched on the counter, her legs wrapped around Michael's waist. They were kissing like teenagers, lost in their own world. Until I cleared my throat. Having fun. My voice didn't even sound like my own. They sprang apart like they'd been electrocuted. Rachel's eyes went wide with shock and guilt. Michael, that smug bastard, actually smirked. "James," Rachel stammered. "Baby, I can explain, Dash." "Explain what?" I cut her off. "How this isn't what it looks like. How you're not at your team-building event." The kitchen had gone silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, but I didn't care. "Honey, please," Rachel started again, sliding off the counter. "Let's talk about this somewhere private." "Private?" I laughed, but it came out more like a bark. "Like how you've been privately screwing your boss for God knows how long." Michael stepped forward, hands raised. "Look, man, why don't we all calm down, Dash?" I saw red. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized I'd moved. He stumbled backward, crashing into a group of people behind him. Chaos erupted. People were shouting. Someone was trying to hold me back. Rachel was screaming something, but I couldn't make out the words over the rushing in my ears. I managed to land another punch before someone yanked me away. Through the commotion, I saw Rachel rushing to Michael's side. That sight, more than anything else, made everything crystal clear. It was over. Everything we'd built together, every promise we'd made, every dream we'd shared gone. I shrugged off whoever was holding me and walked out. Steve was waiting in his yard, concern etched on his face. Man, what happened in there? I grabbed the beer he offered and downed half of it in one go. My wife, I spat out, has been sleeping with her boss. Steve's eyes widened. Holy shit, Ma. I'm so sorry. I nodded, feeling numb. Rachel's voice carried across the yard. James! James, please wait. I turned to Steve. I can't deal with this right now. Can you? Yeah, Ma. I've got you. Go home. Get some rest. I muttered thanks and took off down the street. I walked for hours that night, my mind a jumbled mess of memories and questions. How long had this been going on? Were there others before Michael? Had our entire marriage been a lie? Around 3 in the morning, I found myself back at our apartment. I stood outside for a long time, debating whether to go in. Finally, exhaustion won out. The living room light was on. Rachel sat on the couch, still in that damn black dress. She jumped up when she saw me. Oh, thank God you're home. She rushed toward me. Honey, we need to talk. I held up my hand, stopping her in her tracks. Not now. My voice was raw. I can't even look at you right now. Her face crumpled. Please, she begged. It was a mistake. I love you and Mike. I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. A mistake? You've been sleeping with him for how long, Rachel? She started crying again. Those big tears that used to break my heart. Now they just made me sick. I'm sleeping in the spare room, I said, brushing past her. We'll figure out what to do tomorrow, but right now, I can't be around you. As I closed the door, I could still hear her sobbing. But all I felt was emptiness where my heart used to be. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. When morning came, I dragged myself out of bed. I could hear Rachel in the kitchen, probably making coffee like it was just another day. I steeled myself and walked out to face her. She looked as rough as I felt, still in yesterday's clothes. Hey, she said softly, offer me a mug of coffee. I took it but didn't drink. How long? I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. 3 months, she whispered. The mug shattered in my grip, hot coffee splashing everywhere. I hadn't even realized I was squeezing it that hard. 3 months, I repeated. 3 fucking months. Rachel jumped up to grab paper towels. James, you're bleeding. I looked down at my hand, noticing the cuts from the broken ceramic for the first time. Don't. I pulled away when she tried to help. Just don't. We stood in silence as coffee dripped onto the floor. Why? I finally asked. Was I not enough? Did I not love you enough? Rachel started crying again. It wasn't about you, she said. I felt neglected. You were always working late, Dash. I was working late to save for our future. I exploded. The house you wanted, the life you wanted. She flinched at my outburst. I know, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Please, can we try to work this out? I stared at her, trying to see the woman I married. But all I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's face. Work it out, I said quietly. You lied to my face for months. You broke our vows. People make mistakes, she pleaded. We can go to counseling, Dash. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. I cut her off. A mistake is burning dinner. I took a deep breath. Sleeping with your boss for 3 months? That's a choice, Rachel. Multiple choices. She reached for me again. I stepped back. I'm going to stay with Steve for a while, I said. I need space to think. How long is a while? She asked, her voice small. I don't know, I replied honestly, until I figure out what I want to do next. As I packed a bag, Rachel hovered in the doorway. I love you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I zipped up my bag and turned to face her. The problem is, Rachel, I don't know if I believe that anymore. Steve welcomed me with open arms and a cold beer. His spare room wasn't much, but it was better than staying in that apartment. Better than watching Rachel pretend to be sorry. The first week was a blur of sleepless nights and mindless days. I called in sick to work, couldn't face the outside world yet. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Rachel. Apologies, explanations, accusations, sometimes all three in the same text. I mostly ignored them. Then came the unexpected call. Is this James Mitchell? A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes, who's this? Jessica Thompson, Michael's wife. My stomach dropped. I think we should talk, she said. We met at a coffee shop downtown the next day. Jessica looked like I felt exhausted, haunted, broken. I had no idea, she said, stirring her untouched coffee, about any of it. Neither did I replied. We shared a bitter laugh. Michael's begging for another chance, she said. Says it was a mistake. Rachel saying the same thing. Jessica's hands trembled as she lifted her cup. How do you do it? She asked. How do you look at them without seeing? I cut in. I can't be in the same room as Rachel right now. We talked for hours, comparing notes, sharing our pain. It was oddly therapeutic talking to someone who truly understood. As we were leaving, Jessica hugged me. Whatever you decide, she said, don't let anyone make you feel bad about it. Her words stayed with me. Back at Steve's, I finally made the call I'd been avoiding. Linda Martinez Law Office. A crisp voice answered. I need to file for divorce. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Linda turned out to be exactly what I needed. No nonsense, straight to the point, but compassionate. You're not the first person this has happened to, she said during our first meeting. And you won't be the last. But you will get through this. The paperwork felt overwhelming. 8 years of marriage reduced to forms and signatures. Rachel contested it at first. Her lawyer reached out, talking about reconciliation. I told Linda to shut it down. I want this done, I said. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, stayed late at the office. The irony wasn't lost on me. My boss, Tom, called me into his office one day. James, you're doing great work, he said. But I'm worried about you. I try to brush it off. I'm fine. No, you're not, he replied. And that's okay. He handed me a business card. Dr. Sarah Thompson, psychologist. She helped my brother through his divorce, Tom said. Give her a call. I stared at the card for 3 days before making the appointment. Dr. Thompson's office felt warm, inviting. Nothing like the sterile psychiatrist's offices you see in movies. Why are you here, James? She asked. The question seemed simple. The answer wasn't. My wife cheated on me, I started. Then everything poured out. The late nights, the lies, the party, the aftermath. Dr. Thompson listened, really listened. What do you want from these sessions? She asked when I finished. I want to stop feeling angry all the time, I said. I want to trust again. Primepao, said, realizing something. I want to feel like myself again. She nodded. Those are good goals. It won't be easy, but we can work on that. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Good days when I felt strong, confident. Bad days when the anger and pain threatened to overwhelm me. Steve stood by me through all of it. You're staying as long as you need, he insisted. That's what friends are for. Rachel kept trying to contact me. Each time, it got a little easier to ignore. Dr. Thompson helped me understand why. You're grieving, she explained. Not just the end of your marriage, but the loss of who you thought Rachel was. The loss of the future you planned together. It made sense. The divorce proceedings dragged on. Rachel finally stopped contesting when her lawyer explained it was futile. We divided our assets through mediation. The apartment went up for sale. Splitting up our possessions was like performing surgery on our shared life. Each item held memories, good and bad. Some days I wanted to burn it all. Other days I couldn't let anything go. Keep what brings you peace, Dr. Thompson advised. Let go of what brings you pain. Easier said than done. But slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. I joined a gym, something I'd always wanted to do. The physical exertion helped with the anger. Steve joined too, spotting me on the weights. Looking good, man, he said one day. I realized he was right. I was changing inside and out. Work noticed too. Tom offered me the lead on a major project. You've earned it, he said. I threw myself into the challenge. It felt good to focus on something other than the divorce. Then came the day I had to pack up the last of my things from the apartment. Rachel was supposed to be at work. She wasn't. I thought we could talk, she said when I walked in. She looked different. Thinner, tired, but somehow harder too. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. I still love you, she said. The words didn't hurt like they used to. I know, I said, but love isn't enough anymore. I packed my boxes in silence. As I reached the door, Rachel spoke again. I'm sorry, James, for everything. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I hope you find what you're looking for, Rachel. Then I walked out, not looking back. That night, Steve and I sat on his porch. You okay? He asked, handing me a beer. I thought about it. Yeah, I said, surprising myself. I think I am. The stars were bright overhead. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Like maybe, just maybe, there was life after betrayal. I wasn't okay yet, but I was getting there, one day at a time. 6 months after that night at the party, I found myself in a different place, literally and figuratively. I'd moved into my own apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a different part of town. No memories there, no ghosts of my marriage haunting the corners. Dr. Thompson, and said it was progress. You're rebuilding, she told me during our weekly session. Not just your life, but your identity. She was right. I was discovering who James Mitchell was without Rachel. The divorce was finally finalized. Linda called with the news on a Tuesday morning. It's done, she said. You're officially single again. I sat at my desk for a long time after that call. Divorced at 35. Not where I thought I'd be, but somehow I felt lighter. Steve suggested we celebrate. You're free, man, he said. That calls for drinks. We ended up at a new bar downtown, different from our usual spots. No chance of running into Rachel or our old crowd. So what now? Steve asked over beers. I shrugged. Focus on work. Maybe try some new things. Like dating, he waggled his eyebrows. I nearly choked on my drink. Not ready for that, I said. But Steve had planted a seed. Dating. The thought terrified me. Dr. Thompson and I spent a whole session discussing it. There's no timeline, she assured me. You'll know when you're ready. In the meantime, I focused on myself. The gym was becoming a second home. I started taking cooking classes at the community center. Can't live on takeout forever, I joked to Steve. But really, I just needed something new. Something that was just mine. The first class was basic knife skills. I was terrible, but it felt good to be terrible at something. To be a beginner. No expectations, no pressure. Just learning. That's where I met Amanda. She was the teaching assistant, helping the instructor. Tall, athletic, with a quick smile and an easy laugh. She corrected my knife grip 3 times that first class. Unless you're trying to lose a finger, she teased. I found myself looking forward to Tuesday nights. Not just for the cooking. Amanda was different from Rachel in every way. Where Rachel had been polished and corporate, Amanda was natural and down to earth. She taught cooking by day, trained as a yoga instructor by night. Life's too short not to do what you love, she said. We started talking after class. Just casual conversation at first. About food, about life. She didn't ask about my ring finger tan line. I didn't volunteer the information. But by the 3rd week, I felt I needed to be honest. I'm recently divorced, I told her during cleanup. She nodded, continuing to wipe down the counter. I figured, she said. You have that look. What look? Healing, but still hurting. Her directness was refreshing. Is that a problem? I asked. She smiled. Depends. Are you still in love with her? I thought about it. No, Elisa. I'm just angry sometimes. Anger's okay, she said, as long as it's not all you are. We had coffee after the next class, then dinner the week after that. It wasn't a date, exactly, but it felt like possibility. I told Dr. Thompson about Amanda. How does it feel? She asked. Scary, I admitted, but good scary, like learning to walk again. Work is going well too. The project I was leading was successful. Tom called me into his office again, this time with good news. We're promoting you, he said. You've earned it. The old James would have immediately called Rachel. This James celebrated with Steve and his team. Then came the day I had to attend a colleague's wedding, my first since the divorce. Steve offered to be my plus one. Like old times, he joked. But I surprised myself by asking Amanda. Even more surprising, she said yes. The ceremony was beautiful. Watching the couple exchange vows didn't hurt like I expected. Instead, it felt like watching a different story, one that had nothing to do with mine. Amanda squeezed my hand during the in sickness and health part. She understood. At the reception, someone asked how long we'd been together. We're just friends, Amanda answered smoothly. But the way she looked at me said maybe not for long. We danced. It felt natural, easy. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people enjoying the moment. Later, under the stars, she kissed me. Soft, sweet, asking nothing. Was that okay? She whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. It was more than okay. It was new, different, a beginning. The next day, I ran into Rachel at Starbucks. It had to happen eventually. Boston isn't that big. She looked different. Shorter hair, new style. A stranger wearing my ex-wife's face. Hi, she said, voice small. Hey. Awkward silence. How are you? She asked. Good, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Really good, actually. She nodded. I'm glad, she said. You look happy. I am. More silence. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. For everything. I looked at her. The anger was still there, but distant, like an old scar that only aches when it rains. I know, I said. I hope you're doing okay, Rachel. I'm in it. Walking away felt like closing a book. The story was over. That night, I cooked dinner for Amanda. Nothing fancy, just skills from our classes. She sat on my counter, watching me chop vegetables. Your knife grip is much better, she teased. I grinned. I had a good teacher. Later, curled up on my couch, she asked about Rachel. I told her everything, the whole ugly story. She listened without judgment. Thank you for trusting me, she said when I finished. I realized I did trust her. Not blindly, not completely, but enough to try, enough to hope. Dr. Thompson was right. Healing isn't a destination. It's a journey. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes the anger still rises. Sometimes the trust feels fragile. But most days, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm alive. I'm growing. I'm learning who James Mitchell really is. And I like who I'm becoming. And